Welcome to Pirate Living Podcast. We're your hosts, Karan and Kristen. On this podcast, we are highlighting ordinary people living extraordinary lives. These are pirates who take small, bold actions daily to create social change. Pirate life is all about rebelling and breaking the rules for good. Creating lasting social change starts by first breaking our inner rules. After all, the hardest rules to break are your own. The pirates we highlight have dedicated themselves to creating good trouble.
Today, we are talking with Daniella Cotreau. Daniella is an internationally renowned teacher, spiritual mentor, embodiment expert, business mentor, and best-selling co-author. She's also the creator of the Body Temple Yoga Method, which has transformed thousands to shift energy out of their heads and into their bodies and hearts for self-realization and embodiment of the innate gifts and divine purpose. And in business, Daniella is helping visionary women build businesses that change the world. And Daniella, we are glad to have you here today to be talking with us.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you have you've been on a journey to discover your true self, and we'd love for you to tell us about it and take us on a journey through your pirate tale.
Wow, it's quite a pirate tale, and there's lots of mini pirate tales along the bigger tale to lead to that place. And the challenge I find is always picking, which one of the tales is the one to tell, right? For each podcast that I do, because I'm always asked this question. So I would say, in this moment, it all started with a feeling. It all started with when I was a young person, a young girl in the world, and I was a very observant child, very observant, teenager, still very observant. It's just part of my nature. I learn a lot by observing and by watching. And when I was young, I just looked around and saw how the world worked, how the world moved, how people interacted, what was available to me. And it honestly just started with this feeling of, there's got to be more than this. And I didn't know why I had that feeling, but I just did. It felt like I wasn't getting the full picture of what was really available to me in my life or in life in general. So for whatever reason, that was there for me. And it planted a seed of curiosity. And it set me on this pirate's journey, as we would say here, to go on a journey and explore, well, what is out there? What is available to me? And it had to go, in order to find that out, I had to go outside of what I knew. I had to go outside of what was immediately in front of me or my immediate surroundings. I had to leave some of what I knew as familiar behind, in a sense, and literally go on a journey exactly like a pirate would out on the sea, right? It was like, and out on the sea, what happens? Where there's storms, there's waves, there's the unknown. Don't know where you're going, don't know what's going to happen. So part of that unknown journey that I went on took me many, 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 many places. And that's where it's like, which place do I tell you that I went with the time that we have? But in terms of the self-realization piece, since you brought that up, and like the true self, it started for me when I felt this call to explore yoga. And that was over 20 years ago now. It's a long time ago. And at that point in my life, I also knew that I was in a lot of pain, emotionally, spiritually, physically. I didn't feel very well. There were a lot of experiences that I went through in my childhood and teenage years that were traumatic. Many of us go through a lot of trauma in our lives, or various pieces of trauma, and I did too. And it accumulated because I didn't have the tools to really at the time to know how to process that trauma or to deal with the trauma, nor did I have any mentors to help me, guide me through that it all got stored in my body. And it all got, I just held it in and micromanaged it as best I could, right? Did the best I could with it. But it accumulated in body pain, in emotional pain, in mental pain. And I didn't know how to get out of it. I knew I needed to get out. I knew this wasn't going to be sustainable for the long haul. And so there was one day I I had heard about yoga, and I thought to myself, I wonder if that could help me. And I had no idea at the time. And then I went to my first yoga class, and it was the hardest thing I probably had ever done in my life up to that point, because I had walked in, I didn't realize what a mess my body was until you decide to start to stretch it, and you realize, wow, I really can't move. I can't touch my toes, and I can't do all these things, and everything hurt, like literally everything hurt. However, by the end of the class, I felt freer. I felt freer physically. I felt freer mentally. I felt freer emotionally. I had no idea why that happened, but I knew what I felt. And that was it for me. I said, I've got it. That hurts, but I'm going to go back for more, because that changed me. I felt a shift of liberation inside of me, and I wanted more. And it started this spiritual hunger, so to speak, and this seeking that was already there within me, but it like lit another fire underneath it. And so, that was the end of that. So I ended up going way down the rabbit hole of yoga and exploring more of what it is, and the anatomy, the physiology, how it could help. I placed myself in front of really high level teachers, got the best education I could find. I wanted to know everything about it. And, 20 years later, I ended up shedding and letting go and delayering, so to speak, all the things that weren't me. And that was the beauty of it. I got to see what had been imposed on me, either by my upbringing or my surroundings, or, the education system or society, and the things that it was saying I was, that never felt like a fit. It never felt true. And I was just kind of like, well, okay, but I don't know about that. And all of that through the physical work, right? And this is why, I've become an expert in embodiment, is what I got to learn through that is all the healing that happened for me happened through my body. It didn't happen through my head. I didn't think my way out of it. I didn't think my way through it. It wasn't some magic pill. It was literally realizing that I had so much trapped in my body that needed to release out. And yoga, that the physical aspect of yoga was the tool for that. And the meditation was a tool for that. And the breath work was a tool for that. And all the physical aspects of yoga were all tools for that. And what ended up happening on the other side of that is all this shedding happened. And then the true self just started to come to the surface more and more and more and more. So it was what we'd call a revelation. It was literally just naturally and organically revealed. It wasn't that I had to like go out and get it or purchase it on Amazon or like do any of these things, right? It was something that already existed within me. It was just covered up by all of this stuff and programming and pressure and this and that and the other that wasn't me. So with all that stuff piled on, I couldn't see clearly. And it was a big revelation for me to be like, wow, this is such an amazing way to self-discovery, is through the body. So then through all those years, I ended up, founding a yoga school, naming it Body Temple Yoga. I was very clear why I was going to name it that, because I, through my own experience, I saw the body as a sacred temple of transformation, because that is where and how I healed. It was through the body. And then, of course, I developed my methodology around it. And it's still something, even though I'm not running the yoga school anymore, I transitioned the business in 2021. Now it's Heart Wisdom Leadership Academy, but I still use the Body Temple Yoga method to help people heal themselves and to unveil what's already within them through the body as well. So that's a snippet, of my journey of how I got to where I am today. And then, of course, healed people heal people, hurt people, right? So I consider myself healed, and then there's always more, right? I'm not saying like, I'm perfect and there's no more healing for me to do. Of course, there always is, right? I wish,
Yeah.
Okay, next, like what else can we do? There's always layers, right? There's always more, but such a huge chunk, let's just say, did get healed to the point where I feel, grounded in myself, clear in who I am, not questioning that like I used to when I was younger, and also really motivated to help people do that themselves and know that this is available for every one of us. It wasn't like some special thing that happened to me. It was just, I was blessed enough to find that out through, taking that first step, going on the journey, saying yes, being willing to, exercise courage and going, you know what, I'm going to step outside my comfort zone. I'm going to step outside of what's familiar. I'm going to leave some of that behind so I can see what else is out there. And it proves like so well, for me. And now, my work is so much about that, to guide other people to do that for themselves as well.
So what were you doing before all of this?
Before the yoga?
Yeah.
Before the yoga came in, I had gone to massage therapy school, and I was a full-time massage therapist. So there was obviously something there with the body, right? There was always something that I was continuously drawn to, clearly around the body. So I had, that, and that seeker part of me. I think there was a part of me that was aware that I was seeking healing, and then didn't realize to what degree I was actually seeking healing. To massage school, because I was curious, but again, it was an aspect of me seeking healing for myself. And that very much, did the same thing. And then before that, how far back are we going? Now we're getting back into late teens kind of age there. And, as late teens, you're taking odd jobs and, just doing whatever to get by, but not really having any direction, or not really knowing, right, what this was all about. So it really started for me, I would say, where I really stepped onto the path, like officially, like the curiosity was always there, but I would say I officially stepped onto the path in my early 20s.
And I'm always curious with people. So you're doing massage therapy, and then you get into yoga, and was it just a gradual switch, or was there some sort of like pivotal moment or something that happened that you're like, I need to leave this and go all in on this? So, I mean, that's how Chris and I's pirate journey started a little later in life. And we both had sort of the pivotal moment, but so I'm always curious for other people what that might be.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, the transition from massage therapy to yoga massage therapy is really hard on your body. And I was doing it full time for 5 years, and it took a toll on me. So when the yoga came in, I did notice it helped a ton in terms of my body posture when I'm giving massage. But there was a feeling in me that massage therapy, when the yoga came along, it became clear, even as I integrated them, that massage wasn't the end all be all for me. It was a stepping stone. And I'm even seeing that now, like way far out now, that 20 years of yoga and 10 years running a yoga school was also a stepping stone to what I'm doing now with Wisdom Leadership Academy. And I think that was something that I also learned too, is, it's an evolution. It's not like, okay, I've landed the thing and now I'm done. I'm just going to do the thing. And maybe not, maybe it's a stepping stone. Maybe it is the thing for right now. And then it has its own lifetime. And when it's done its work on you, which massage therapy had done what it was going to do on me and like for me, then yoga came in, and it was like, now here's your next step. Here's your next evolution. Because we are here, I believe anyway, that we are here to evolve, to keep evolving who we are, to keep evolving our consciousness, to keep exploring. And we talk about infinite potential and, we're limitless and all of these things. And while I agree with that, it's one thing to say, it's another thing to live it, right? Keep exploring, keep going out to sea, and keep seeing what else is out there, because it's a whole other world out there, right?
Yeah. And I think that growth is so much more natural than what tends to happen as we get stuck and stagnant and we don't make any changes.
Exactly.
And I think we all know people like that have, or I don't know, go to a high school reunion and you're like, wow, you are exactly the same as you were in high school. Like you should have grown by now.
Like, what happened?
Where did you get stuck?
Right. Right. And it's not even necessarily, their fault that that's even happening. It goes back to like what we are shown and what we are taught. We almost get pigeonholed into, well, you do the thing and then you go get the education, you go to college and then you get out and you get the house and the white picket fence, and you're like, wow, my whole life has been set for me and I didn't even have a say in it, and then people get pigeonholed into these things that were never them to begin with. Were never meant for them to begin with. And then that leads to the stagnation and to feeling stuck and start questioning, is this it? Is this life? Like, it's like, and I cheerlead people when I talk to them and they say something like that. They start inquiring and they say, is this it? Is there something more? And I celebrate that they're asking that, because I was there once. And I know even in just the asking, even when you're stuck, that's a doorway. That's a doorway into, okay, follow that, keep asking, keep getting curious, because the answer is there is more. But for every one of us, it's our individual choice to take that leap or not, right? But I think the feelings of stagnation that people feel and their life plateaus, and we get all this kind of external feedback, and I see that as feedback. It's like letting us know. It's like steering the ship, right? And you're like, you want to steer it in a way like with the wind or whatever. I don't know. I'm not a pilot on sea anyway. Not exactly sure how that works, but I'm sure there's a lot of attunement to the direction, right? And so we have that same internal compass that we can tap into too, where we're getting this feedback going, okay, there's stagnation. I'm starting to feel depressed. I'm starting to feel lost. And if we're talking about true nature, none of that goes with that. Like when you're tapped into your true nature, it doesn't include stagnation and feeling lost and depressed and anxious and stressed out. Those are all markers of alignment. Like, are you in alignment? Are you still like attuned to who you really are? Or are we getting off the mark? And it's okay that we do. That's part of the journey too. It's not a straight line, as we know. But I think having that internal compass to pull us back and being willing to look and question and to get curious is everything.
Yeah, that I like all the analogies.
I love analogies. They're really great. They're helpful.
Good.
Yeah.
And just thinking too of how that stagnation, like I'm feeling that feeling as we're talking about it. Like, yeah, I remember that feeling of stuckness. And before I made the choice to go on my own too, I had a couple of years of like, I know I want to do something else. I don't know what. And I had like yoga for me. I had been doing online yoga at home, but still, it had helped. Like I was feeling calmer while teaching. And then I did acupuncture, and that was helping. Like I realized acupuncture, I could go about a week without feeling anxiety in my body. And I didn't realize that was like between yoga and acupuncture. I remember one day at work, I was like, I keep thinking there's something wrong, but really what's happening right now is that I'm not feeling anything in my body. Like I'm not feeling my anxiety.
Right.
And like, this is normal. This is what my body should feel like.
Exactly.
And it was like, there was stagnation, and there were all these questions I was asking, and I had little glimpses here and there of like, this is what life can be like, this is how you can feel. But it was hard to take those leaps and to take those steps to be like, and how do I get there? How do I follow my heart? Like it was painful too, but there was also way more pain of staying the same than it was to take the step forward.
I love that you brought that up. That's such a great point of like, choose your hard kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's not like, I was just like free bird and like went off massage and yoga. Like, I don't want to paint that picture either, because it wasn't easy to first leave what was familiar. And then, that's not easy at all. And then to actually go through the unraveling and to all the letting go and like learning what that means, and having to feel it to heal it, as is said a lot now. And it's like, having to feel the pain that maybe I pushed away or didn't want to, or delayed, put off, like in order to heal it, I had to walk through some fires and some internal fires. And by no stretch of the imagination were they easy. But like to your point, it's like, which one, is it more painful to stay the same, or is it, can I walk through this temporary pain only to feel better on the other side? And to me, it was a no-brainer. Once I figured out like that was the choice and that was going to happen, I was like, oh, by far, like, let's go do this temporary pain thing, because I know the reward on the other side is far greater, far outweighs, staying the same and staying stuck. So I love that you brought that up. That's such an important piece.
Well, it's interesting. I've heard that like as humans, we're more motivated by pain than we are by the reward.
Yeah.
And so I really like what you had to say, because like, I know when we talk about like pivotal moments, right? So Kristen and I both left our jobs during the pandemic to go out on our own. And for me, that pivotal moment was when I was working in corporate health and safety at the time, and we got the task we were all at home in quarantine, whatever.
Right.
We got the task to like start creating the return to work plans. And that idea of returning to work, that pain of like, that's what motivated me to leave my job, of like, I can't go back to that. Like we had that break, that reprieve, I was working from home, like whatever. So it was more of like, I knew what I had wanted to do, but it was more of that motivation from like you said, the pain of actually going back to work was more motivating to me than the like idea of like, hey, I could do this other job and like not cry at work every day.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really interesting how we have like those different motivations and what actually gets us to take action.
Yeah. And pain, and I'll clarify too, like it was both for me. It was like, I know I want to feel better, but it was a similar thing of like the pain of staying the same, which could be like, just go back to how you were. That was like a hard no, and similar to what you're saying, it's like you step away from it for a while, which you got to, which gave you the space to actually see it differently, I imagine.
Yeah.
Then it was time to go back, and you're like, no way, I can't go back to that. There's no way, I'm a different person now, and I see differently now. So than you were when you were just in it. Sometimes we're so deep in it, you can't see clearly, right?
Yeah.
You have some kind of something that comes in to give you the space and to give you that little glimpse of a new perspective. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
And so what was the change then from what you're doing with the yoga studio to what you're doing now?
With the yoga school? Yeah. So that's an interesting evolution too. Because a lot of people thought I was crazy to transition the business because it was doing so well. I mean, it was thriving, and every year got better, and every year enrollment went up, and I would say word of mouth was probably my top marketing tool at the time, because the work just spoke for itself. All the education that I saw, I was like, I'm going to teach them everything I possibly can in this school. And I didn't see a lot of what I was teaching out there in other schools or other, teacher trainings. And I was like, wow, I see a place for bringing what's not being brought. And so I brought it, and people were coming in going, oh, I'm here, I'm going to get a teacher training. And little did they know they were going to completely, discover who they were. And on the other side of that work, shed a lot, transform a lot, embody a lot, open their hearts, and discover who they really were. And my students literally every year would say, they come up to me at the end of the program and they'd thank me. And then they'd say, that was way more than a yoga teacher training. And I was like, yes, it was. The sign on the door, but once I get you in my world, well, that's a whole other thing. So what ended up happening is I got this, probably it was like 2015, somewhere in there. So I transitioned to school in 2021, I believe. I got the message in 2020. So it was like 5 years later. But in 2015, I'm in the middle of teaching a teacher training. Everything's going great. People are, hearts are opening, epiphanies here, breakthroughs there, meltdowns over there in that corner, like everything's happening, right? And all of a sudden I'm in the middle of, helping somebody, and I hear this voice in my head just drops in, and it just says, at some point, you're going to change the name of your business. And I'm like, excuse me? I'm like, what are we talking about here? I'm like, everything's going great. And then I just kind of like, well, okay, but that's not happening now. So I'm just going to put that on the shelf. And then I didn't forget about it, obviously, but I put it on the shelf and just continued on. Well, then 5 years later, I figured if it was going to happen, I would just know when it's time, and just trusted that and let it go. So then 5 years later, I'm on a call with one of my mentors at the time, and I was working privately with him, and he got to see behind the scenes of what I was actually doing. And he was like, do you know you're doing more than just certifying yoga teachers? And I was like, yes. And he's like, do you know you're doing more than yoga teacher training and running a yoga school? I'm like, yes. He's like, you need to change the sign on your door. And I went, oh boy, here we go. And like, right when he said it, I got chills like across my entire body. And I was like, okay, it's time. And like the first words out of my mouth to him were like, oh, bleep, because I wasn't in agreement, but I knew what it was going to take to like overhaul my entire business and shift things, which it took some work, but I was willing to do it because the guidance was clear. It felt right. It felt in alignment. The timing felt right. And I just went for it. And so that was another example of just like taking a huge leap of faith. And, even though everything was working fine, like people say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it wasn't that situation for me. It was an evolution. And that was more, let's just say, of what I was committed to than staying the same. Right. Because up to that point, I had so many experiences of the benefits of not staying the same, so many years of that and so much evidence of that in my life, that I was like, okay, I'm not arguing. Like, I know how this rolls, so we'll just do it. So yeah, what I had realized as I was leading the yoga school is people were transforming who they were, realizing their true self, and their lives would change. Like they would, realize they're with the wrong person in an intimate relationship, or they'd realize they're in the wrong job. Like, I got to quit my job. Daniella, what are you doing to me? And I'm like, I'm not doing anything to you. You're getting in alignment with yourself, and you're finally seeing with new eyes what hasn't been in alignment and needs to change. And so that was happening left and right for those people. And what was missing from the yoga schools, and what became Heart Wisdom Leadership Academy, is, well, now that they know who they are and they need to change their job, and now they want to do something that's in alignment with who they are, I didn't teach them any of the business stuff that I knew from running a business and how to do it, because I have obviously been running a business that was in alignment with, what I was called to do and my heart and what I felt, really passionate about. And it was successful, right? So then I realized, oh, wow, I could teach them this, so like the next step for them, instead of just leave them hanging like, yeah, I know who I am, but I don't know what to do with it now. Right. So then Heart Wisdom Leadership Academy was born, and then shifted into teaching them how to take that alignment with self, who they really are, their passions, what they feel called to do in this life, and then build their dream life and their dream business around it. So they're making money, making a living, doing what they love. And what they love is serving a greater purpose. Somehow it's helping other people. Like I've been helping other people from the gifts and the blessings that I received. So then there's this huge ripple effect that happens, right? With everyone that, that I've served. Now they're going out and doing their gifts and talents and making waves in the world in a positive way that's outside the norm, that's outside the box, that's outside all the things that you should do, right? And getting in alignment with what they're called to do, so.
And it's funny how that happens when it's like, when you start dropping all the you shoulds, that so many people start to look at life and be like, I don't want to work for somebody else anymore. And so many like that from there start saying, I want to help others, and I want to start my own business. And most of the time it's completely unique and new and different what somebody comes up with on what their purpose, their calling in the world is. And it's such a fun thing to see.
Yeah, it really is. It's one of the joys that I have. And even with the yoga school, just watching people slowly come to life again,
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're being reborn. There's more light in their eyes, more light in their face, more pep in their step, you know, and just like they're coming back online, so to speak, you know, and it's just incredible. And so then the next level that I'm witnessing now is, you know, they're online, they're excited about, you know, moving on to the next thing. They're in alignment with who they are. And now they're just curious to be like, well, what can I do with all this? And then to see what gets pulled out of them, because I take them through a process that pulls their true vision out of their heart. And then they build a business around it, and then watch them come to life again, where they get to enjoy the joys and the fulfillment of being of service, and seeing that who they are is enough, and that who they are is a gift, and that the gifts that they have within them are valuable, not just to themselves, but to other people. And they get to see that in the delivery of their business. I call it a heart-based business. But they get to see that in delivery of it. So they light up all over again and get really excited. So it makes the whole entrepreneurial journey a little bit more, you know, enjoyable too, because that's a whole other thing, right? As I'm sure you ladies know, it's takes a certain kind of, you know, devotion and commitment and mindset to be an entrepreneur. So if we're going to do that, it might as well be in alignment as well.
Yeah, being an entrepreneur is it's no joke.
Yeah.
Like,
Not for the faint of heart.
no,
None of this
not.
is. None of what we've talked about is, you know.
Yeah, it does take a certain I don't know, strength to do all of this. And because I mean, and like you said right at the start, it's not an easy journey. And I don't think we've ever on like this podcast pretended that it's easy. I mean, but yeah, it's a trip.
Yeah, it is.
So I'm curious, we talk a lot on our podcast about good trouble. What does good trouble mean to you, and what are you doing to create good trouble in the world?
Yeah, I love that question. When I hear good trouble, I think of like the word disruption, like comes to mind, or being a disruptor, you know. And that could be interpreted in obviously a lot of different ways, but the way that I see it is like a disruptor of the status quo, you know, of breaking molds that are outdated, or maybe were never true to begin with, that we've lived under for generations. And that nobody ever questions. They just kind of like, oh, that's how it is. Okay, well, that's just how it is. That's just how life is. And it's like, okay, hold on a second. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely the first thing. So good trouble. I mean, it's bringing like, the trouble is disrupting things. It's disrupting patterns, patterns of, you know, habitual patterns that aren't serving the way that we operate as individuals, with each other, how the world operates, how business operates. I would say probably that's one of the things that I bring in terms of like, to answer your question of like, how do I bring good trouble? Is disrupting this idea that's been passed on through generations of like, you can't make a living doing what you love. Like you just have to get a job and suck it up and go to work and all of that. And meanwhile, I understand where that came from. And I understand like the generations and what was going on at that time and why that mindset was there. So I'm not saying that to throw anybody under the bus. It's more just acknowledging the evolution of like, at some point, something's got to break when we realize it isn't working. And that's the good trouble that's coming along and being like, you know, I'm going to raise some trouble here. I want to stir the pot, because sometimes we need to stir the pot to wake up. You know, we get so in our ruts and the monotony of our habits without question. We just kind of do the thing, right? And sometimes it takes getting triggered. Oftentimes, right? Where we kind of snap out of our own slumber of like, wait a minute, why am I doing this? You know, I don't actually like this, right? I'm not actually happy doing this, or whatever it is, right? Or in this relationship or whatever. So yeah, I would say, you know, with the work that I do now, it's definitely disrupting that old belief and bringing some good trouble in there, because the good part of that good trouble is people are realizing they can make a living doing what they love and thrive, not just survive on it, but thrive on it. And in fact, I would even take it a step further with a little bit more trouble, and say, that is the path to abundance. That is the path to bringing in even more, money and abundance and revenue through your business. Because if you're lit and you're in alignment with who you are, the world's going to see the best of you, the best version of you. You're going to bring the best version of you. And that just becomes very magnetic. And people want to be around that. Oh, I want some of that. Like, where did she get that? Can I have some of that? Like, how do I get some of that? Right.
Mm-hmm.
I want what she has, or what they have, or whatever. But yeah, I like good trouble. It's good.
Yeah, it's funny because this says I'm here to create good trouble, and which is along the lines of the idea of stirring the pot and asking those questions and following your heart. So yeah, I like how you thought, like mentioned with good trouble too. It's like it's questioning beliefs, questioning, do these beliefs, are they even mine, or was I given them? It's stirring the pot, and it's
Yes.
Mhm.
Are they even mine? That's
Mhm.
like, hold on a second. It's that space thing again. It's like stepping back to have a little bit of space for new perspective and go, wait a minute. I know I've been living under this my whole life and believing it, but did I make this up, or did I get this somewhere, or where did I get this? And is this really true for me?
Mhm.
So that self-inquiry, that self-inquiry muscle, is such a huge part of, everything I think we're talking about too. It's what began the whole thing for me, is just going, being that observer and just looking and taking that step back and going, is this feel like a fit? Is this it? Is this all there is? But then following that curiosity. And the way that I talk about the heart too is the qualities of the heart. There's different qualities of the heart. Curiosity is one of them, right? If you look at a child, here's another analogy. Like if you look at a child, they are filled with curiosity. They want to get into that and under this and pull that and take this and spill that, or whatever they're doing. But it's all curiosity. They're like, wow. And there's awe and there's wonder, and that's compelling them to move. Right. And somehow we lose that as we get older, because society's got all this stuff to say and pack down over us. Right. And we get bombarded with so much, especially these days with the internet and social media. So that to keep the curiosity of the heart alive, I think is a really big piece. And that's part of the heart work that I do. Thus, Heart Wisdom Leadership Academy is not only am I doing the embodiment work to help open people's hearts, but I'm doing that to help people access more of their heart and these pieces of it that we're talking about here that are so valuable, and that keep that curiosity, that childlike curiosity, very, very lit, very alive in them.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I was just thinking, I'm like, where do we lose that as a child? Is it, it's just we go to school and we're taught not to question anymore. We're taught like, do as you're told, listen to your teacher, whatever that is. But where do you think along the way we lose that curiosity?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. And I probably have to agree with you that our schools, because it was like, I was never taught how to think for myself when I went to school. Like, you just didn't do that.
Yeah.
You just didn't. And you went to school and you were told what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And if you didn't do it in all those ways, you got punished, right? So there was no space for freedom of expression or even exploration so much. In that, and as young kids, I mean, we're like sponges. We just take it all in, and it becomes, part of our programming, So I think for me, at least, that was a big piece of like, I just didn't receive that. And I would say part of like the unraveling that had to happen for me was unraveling some of that stuff and realizing that I had been programmed, and that I had been, raised to think a certain way or not think, right? Or to like actually start to explore what that might be like. And it was uncomfortable at first. It felt like, putting on like your first pair of jeans that like don't really fit, and like, but after like the 10th wear, they're finally you. It felt like that. It was like the first try was like, this is awkward, like I feel uncomfortable. I'm sweating right now. My heart's beating a mile a minute. Like nobody taught me this. Is this right? But I think something about it kept me in the game or the curiosity piece kept me in the game because there was that hunger to know more and that feeling of like, this can't be it. So yeah, I'd probably point at our education system, and that'd be a good trouble place to unpack of how much goes on in that and indoctrination that's inherent in that.
Yeah, education. I didn't talk in school much growing up. In fact, in kindergarten, I wasn't talking really at all. And so my teacher started giving me a penny for every time I did talk, or at least she said she gave me a penny. I never saw them. But there were like within that, me not talking was an issue to the teachers. And because it was an issue to the teachers, the kids around me noticed. And versus like, I'm sitting there, I don't feel like participating. I don't want to participate in the way that we have to. Like if first of all, I had students of my own when I became a teacher that were a lot like me. And what I enjoyed doing with them was just telling them like, hey, sometimes I'm going to need an answer from you. Then I'm going to let you know. But otherwise, like, you're free to nod your head. You're free to whisper to me. I mean, even if I need an answer, you can still whisper to me. And I watched them bloom. Like, they were using their voice by the time they went to their next like class at their other school, because I was in childcare. But yeah, it's like the things that were programmed in of how me not using my voice was an issue. It was a problem, and it was something that needed to be solved, instead of just allowing me to observe around me and participate when I felt comfortable. And because of that, there were so many things that I built in my life of how I'm not showing up in the world the way that I'm supposed to. And yeah, it's all the things we learn and we get to unlearn later on.
So true. So true. Yeah, you're reminding me as I hear your story. Of course, I'm thinking of my own too, and I'm sure the audience is going, "Oh yeah." Yeah, I was also very quiet as a child too, and in school. I didn't say much at all. Again, that was more of the witness and the observer and just kind of watching things. And then, yeah, there were just a lot of things that I didn't want to participate in, so to speak. And I never felt like I fit in. I never felt like I fit in with anybody. Always felt like an outcast, and that it's like, where do I fit? I don't know where I fit. It's not clear where I fit. And do I even fit? I questioned that a lot. I went through school, like all of school, all the way through till I got myself out of there. But yeah, I can relate to what you're saying for sure in that way. And it also reminds me of the very first time that I spoke, like in front of a group, was the most nerve-wracking thing for me, because I had never really spoke in front of a group. Like raising my hand in class growing up was the scariest thing ever. To be called on was the scariest thing ever for me. And nobody believes that now, because now I'm like talking, I have all these things to say, right? I could talk forever on podcasts, they're like, you never, but that's the thing, that it's the transformation that I went through of this quiet little reserved kid that didn't have a lot to say and was petrified to say anything. To, the moment where I was in a position where I had to, and that was when I first became certified as a yoga teacher, and I had to teach my very first yoga class back in the day. And I probably spent, like, it was a 4:00 class in the afternoon that I had to teach. And I literally spent the entire day writing the class out. It was only gonna be an hour class, but I took the whole day and I kept rewriting it and redoing it. And I was so nervous. And then when I taught the class, I was just sweating the whole time. Just sweating and shaking, and I felt like my voice was shaking, and I thought it was probably the worst class they'd ever experienced their entire life. And of course, really hard on myself. And then afterwards, I got all the praise, like, that was amazing, and da, 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 da. But I remember just feeling like, wow, this is the first time I'm going to really open my mouth and share with people and lead people. And it was such a rite of passage in its own way. That was a pivotal moment for sure.
Mhm.
And I realized I could speak
Mm.
in front of people, and that I did have things to say that were of value. But prior to that, I had no clue. I had no clue. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm also fellow introvert. I love one-on-one conversations, group, and I teach group classes. And the amount of times, even still today, where like my little watch was like, "You did a workout." I'm like, "No, I didn't do a workout. I just taught a group class." And like your heart rate was elevated for a whole hour.
Yes, that's so funny.
Yeah, that was a good fitness. Me just public speaking in front of maybe it's just like there was a new person in the class that I didn't know, or someone unfamiliar, but the physical reactions that happen just from having to talk and be uncomfortable
Yes.
in those situations is interesting.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It takes courage. It takes a lot of courage to do that. I mean, it took everything in me to get my butt to teach that class that day.
Mhm.
But I'm so glad it did, because it was another revelation. It was that pivotal moment where it revealed to me of like, oh, I do have a lot to say.
Mhm.
And I would never have known had I not put myself in that circumstance, in that situation where I had to,
Mhm.
I was almost forced to in a way, but I had to force myself to get there. Otherwise, I would never have known. I would have stayed the same.
Mhm.
I would never know that, oh, I do have value to bring to people. Wait a minute,
Mm.
Yeah.
And yeah, with the value that you're bringing to people, do you want to share anything more that you haven't shared yet about what you do with Heart Wisdom Leadership Academy?
I feel like I've shared a lot,
You
but we just
have.
kind of organically went there, huh?
Yeah.
I guess I will share. There's definitely more to share, but I guess I'll share like the overall mission,
Mhm.
like the bigger reason why I'm doing it, which is also something that I help people also get in touch with, because I think if you have that bigger reason why you're doing what you're doing now, it's like your North Star. It keeps you in the game, because as we said, entrepreneurship isn't necessarily a walk in the park. And there are certainly days where I've wanted to quit. I've lost count at this point, but obviously I haven't. But those days do happen, and they're not. It's not unrealistic to say that. But what has kept me in the game in those moments is like knowing that North Star and knowing my mission. And for me, it's world change. I'm here to make an impact on world change. And the way that, for me, how I see it and feels in alignment with the work in the world, it has a lot to do with the heart. Like I carry this belief of like, if we're not living so much from the neck up, which is kind of crazy in and of itself, this is like, right, it's madness up here. And we're disembodied, right? We're not connected to, some of the things we touched on today that live in the body and what's available through the body. To me, the body is the access point to the heart. When we're in the body, it's so much easier to be able to access the true self, which is in the heart, right? And I imagine a world where people are moving through the world as that. They're not disembodied. They're in their bodies. They're connected to their hearts. When that happens, it changes not only who we are, but it changes how we show up, how we interact with each other, how we treat each other, how we run businesses, how we do business, the things that we do, how we serve. It's a whole different reality when the heart is leading. And I want to add a caveat here, because when I say, lead with the heart, or follow your heart, or let the heart lead, or heart leadership, I'm saying it's a healed heart. That's the caveat. It's not the resentful heart. It's not the heart that's still got a bunch of trauma and closed down, shut down, hasn't forgiven or holds resentment or still has stuff to work out. It's not that, because that heart that's leading, it creates more mess, right? It's the unhealed, right? It's the hurt people. So I want to be really clear that there's a healing aspect. There's a transformation that we go through to have a purified heart, a cleansed heart. And that heart is what I'm talking about. that goes out into the world and does amazing, great things for people. And my vision is, or mission is to birth or to support or help guide any heart wisdom leaders into the world as I possibly can, so that there are more of those people walking around doing what they're doing, but from the heart, they're having a ripple effect. And then who they serve is having a ripple effect. And then there's a legacy that I leave behind. So I'm thinking of it in those terms, like it can't just be me. It's got to be something that ripples out and carries on through generations, right? Just like we've seen things be carried through generations that maybe didn't serve, where we need some good trouble to come in. So this is kind of the good trouble, I guess you could say that too. But that's the mission that I hold with the Academy and the work that I'm doing.
And I like the idea too, with like a business having the ripple effect. My husband and I, we don't have kids, but we've talked in the past too, like we don't have kids. And we've done all the healing of our hearts. And we have no one to pass that on to, but yeah, when you can have a ripple effect with business too, like that potentially has an even greater impact than bringing into the world children to raise and be able to pass that on to. So yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah. I mean, you can leave a legacy. It doesn't always have to be through your children. I love that too, but that's completely amazing. But a legacy can also be left otherwise. And in this case, as we're talking, it's business too, because businesses shape our world. Everything's run on a business. They really shape our society and they shape our world. So if we have businesses that are run by a purified heart, a cleansed heart, a righteous heart, well, that's going to change a lot. It's going to change a lot. And on the people level too, which we talked about for generations too. Power's in the people. Well, it's still true. I still believe that's true. But the other thing is we actually need to walk that out. So this is my, my contribution to do that.
Well, it's interesting too, how often like that healing is then spurs on the business. Like it's, I mean, Kristen and I were both going through different personal development programs when we made the changes in our lives. So it wasn't sorry, I have a dog that really wants to say hello to me. It was the thing that spurred on the changes that we made, rather than necessarily like the business didn't heal me. I was healed so then I could move on and do that, like where you said, like more heart led work. So I think those do really go hand in hand, and that I find that with a lot of the like pirates that we talk to.
They do go hand in hand. I love that you brought that up too. It's actually something that I live by and I've taught my students over the year, and just shared with them a piece of my story, that when I reflect back on the success of the yoga school, back in the day, it was, every year we'd have another, best year ever. And when the next year was about to start, the first thing I would do wasn't like the latest and greatest business strategy. It was actually asking myself the question of, okay, what do I need to heal next? What's the next level of healing that I need to do to evolve myself, to grow into the next level? What's my next, hiccup or block or fear that I need to overcome? Like basically, who do I need to become to grow this business again? And then I would answer that question and do the healing, whatever that was, and, get mentorship and support around that. And sure enough, the business would do well again that year. And it blew my mind too, because I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Like this really works, and like, I knew it in theory, but then like walking it out is a whole other thing. Right. So I totally agree with that. It's like, you want to grow your business, work on yourself, because you're at the helm. You're at the helm of that business. So if you're not changing, your business isn't changing. If you're not growing, your business isn't growing. And so they're so intertwined. Yeah,
absolutely. Cool. Where can our listeners go to find out more about you?
They can go everywhere. I'm pretty much all over the internet. They can go to my website, Daniella, C as in cat for my last name, DaniellaC.com. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. Not sure where I'm not at this point. No, I'm just kidding. But Yeah, they can find me everywhere. I'm not hard to find on social media, and happy to connect anytime.
And we'll have all those links below. So yeah. Yeah. And before we wrap and ask our final question, is there anything you want to add that we haven't talked about, or anything you might want to ask us?
I mean, I'm so curious about your journey and like your stories, because I got little snippets of it in our conversation. I'm like, oh, I want to hear more. I want to hear about. So it's so fun to hear, if you hear the stories of how people got to where they were, and the obstacles they overcome. So I guess that'd be my question, to you ladies is, what would you say was your biggest, pivotal moment that got you to where you are today? I mean, I always love hearing what people choose. And then before I answer that, I'll just say to the audience, something that I'd love to just leave them with, if that's okay, is to follow that feeling. If there's even a hint of that small feeling that there's something more, that there's something different, but you don't know what it is to trust that. It may be the smallest little voice that you hear, but it's the most significant. And to lean into it, to get curious, to follow it, and go on a pirate's journey with it. Let it take you outside the box. Let it take you outside your comfort zone. Let it take you to places in yourself and outside of yourself that you wouldn't get to know otherwise. So yeah, I just really want to say, like, trust that inkling, trust that voice. So yeah, I would love to hear anything that you ladies would love to share about your stories.
I'm going to let Kristen start. I'll be right back.
Yeah, well, it goes a couple different places. Like I said, when I was younger, I wasn't really talking much. And I was told that you're shy. And so that was a label that I got to wear and carry with me. Right. And learning along the way of what is my voice? What do I want to say? I went in to become a teacher, and the voice thing followed me for forever, because I go to my, what was it? It was my student teaching advisor. She and I were talking one day, and she basically told me, she didn't say not to be a teacher, but she was advising me that because of my voice, that I might not be the best teacher. And I'm like, why do I have to be loud and able to yell to be a teacher? And yeah. And then getting into teaching too, where it's like, oh, I feel like I have to have my voice raised, because that's what you see so often from teachers, is like, you got to be the stern teacher. You got to raise your voice in order for them to listen. And I did student teaching for a while, or no, substitute teaching for a while. And that felt like I was doing a lot of that. In fact, I quite often would get sick losing my voice because I had to yell. And then I had a few years of tutoring where I got to just have a relationship with the kids, and we had a great time and I loved it. And then my husband and I moved, and I went into childcare, and I got to have a mix of having that relationship with kids. And then I got a classroom with teaching 5-year-olds, and I was working with another teacher who was more of the stern type. And I like, oh, that's who I have to model myself after, because the kids listen to her, and it just didn't feel like me. And yeah, eventually I learned all the areas where I hadn't been speaking up for myself. I hadn't been using my voice or telling people what I want. Instead, I was saying yes to everybody else. Like, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, sure. This sounds great. Whatever you want, not what I want. Once I learned all the ways I'd been passing my voice off, and I started to learn about, like, with the personal development that I'd been doing, learning more about me, I also was like, you know what? I don't want to be that yelling teacher. That's never felt good. And we just had more fun in the classroom. The behaviors started dropping off that I had. Like, I felt like I was putting out fires every day for a while. And those started to drop off the more I leaned into me, and I didn't have to raise my voice very often. It was mostly just if they're loud and I'm like, hey guys, we're going to be going to recess soon, so I need you to clean up. Like, more like the attention getting and not I'm yelling at you and I'm being stern.
Right.
So yeah, and even with that too, like as I was realizing my breath got better, which also led to my voice being able to be louder than it ever had really been before too. So just yeah, I would say the journey largely revolved around me figuring out like who am I? What is it that I want to say? And it really did stem back to my childhood where I wasn't talking and people told me you need to. It's not okay that you're quiet. I don't like this. It's not making me comfortable.
Uh-huh. Yep. Wow. Powerful. Powerful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Your turn, Karan.
Yeah, I would say mine is just really coming home to a calling that, like, my very first job as a teenager was coaching people. I used to teach. I was in karate as a young kid,
Wow.
very young, and I was competitive, and I used to coach and teach like kids classes, and then coach other classes, and it was my very first job. I got hired by the local community center to teach like kids karate classes, and got a job at a gym and was doing personal training. It was a women's only gym, and all of those things I left to get real jobs after. And teaching had always been somehow found its way into whatever quote unquote real job I was doing. So I was a police officer for a little while back home, but also ended up as a swimming and life-saving instructor for the police academy. And then I got a corporate job doing like hazmat work when I moved to Canada, but also then became a technical corporate trainer. And so teaching always sort of found its way into what I was doing, even when the thing I was doing wasn't actually the right thing for me.
Right.
And yeah, like I said, it was during COVID. The world shut down here, and at the time I was part-time coach at a gym, and then had my full-time job. And the idea of going back to work and doing, continuing on the path that I was on was it was too much, and I couldn't do it. And so quit my job in arguably the worst time. Gyms were closed. And when we reopened, I had one client left. So literally just started from scratch. And that this is where, we've had this conversation that it's not easy. Like,
Right.
financially, that was very challenging to have only one paying client, and just have been working really hard to grow my business the last 3 years, and resuming that focus of like women's health with both training and nutrition, and being able to serve the women in my community is that heart-centered work that I really kind of started with in my youth, and it feels like returning home to doing the right thing that I was meant to do. So that's a little bit of my journey, because it's been a weaving tales across countries and very different careers, and yeah, that's what's led me here.
I love it. I love that you added the piece about returning home.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. I so get that. It is like that. It's like your own homecoming. You're like, oh, here I am. Right?
Who knew I was on the right path at like age 15?
Yeah. And that's like so powerful, because it's like part of us already knows. It's like we already came in with it.
Yeah.
We already came in knowing on a level, right? Then things happen and we get distracted and pulled this way and that way and told what to do and like put you in a box over here. And then of course we get confused and we forget and get lost. So I love that it's like a homecoming home to yourself again. Like, oh, I've been here all along. Oh, it's amazing, right? It's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I had a friend recently say about me, she's like, I feel like as long as you're having fun, like that's the important part for you. And I was like, you're right. Like that is like, that's largely why I'm
Always see
drawn to
that.
working with kids, like, because
Yeah.
it's fun. It brings the
Mhm.
joy. Crochet. So I keep hitting this desk, so and it makes noise. Like crocheting little critters is fun, which I got Kron into now too.
We're hooked. We're both hooked. Yeah. We're going to start this podcast is going to take a sudden shift to be a crochet podcast.
Part 2 happening now.
Part 2.
So yeah, you gave your little piece of advice. Is there anything else you want to add to recommend as a recommendation for our listeners starting their own pirate journey?
Yeah, let's see. What can we add to that? So yeah, if you're starting your own pirate journey, it's paying attention to that voice. It's going to feel and sound very small and insignificant, but it won't leave you alone. I'll tell you that. And most people experience that. They're like, oh, it keeps coming back around. I'm like, yeah, there's maybe a reason for that. So to first listen to that. If you don't hear that, if you're someone that maybe is like, I don't even hear the voice, like, I don't even hear that, like, then what do I do? My suggestion would be start moving in the direction towards embodiment. Do things that are body-based, activities that are body-based. It may be yoga, it may not be yoga. It may be meditation, may not be. See where you feel called, what you feel curious about, that's body-based, because as the body opens, things start to happen. Transformation starts, energy shifts and flows in different ways. We have a different level of feeling grounded on this planet, on the earth, and in your own body. That's a really big piece, is being comfortable in your own skin. Comes with a lot more than just thinking you look good, right? There's a feeling that comes with it that's carries a lot of wisdom. There's a lot of wisdom in the body. So that's what I would say to people who don't hear the voice. You probably will if you start moving towards embodiment practices that can help you access it more. And then from there, go on the journey. Go be a pirate. Set sail and go explore where you feel curious, where you feel called, and trust that you'll be led in the right direction. And like we've shared here, there were stepping stones. I had stepping stones. Karan had stepping stones. Kristen had stepping stones. We all had stepping stones to where we are now. None of them were wrong. They weren't maybe the ultimate at the time, but they were clues. Mm-hmm. They were clues into where we were headed. Mine was always body-based. Why the body? Why the body? Right? Ended up taking me to where I am. Karan, it was like, okay, why teacher? Why teacher? Why teacher? Kept showing up for her. And the same with Kristen. It's like, there's this fun, there's this playfulness that she knows she has to have and that she brings, to her podcast. And so to pay attention to the clues, and they'll lead you to the right place. And then maybe the last thing I'll say is keep going. Don't quit.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.